Hey guys, today I'm gonna give you some tips and share my approach to painting that I hope you'll find helpful. I'll be doing this demonstration in oil paint on a 12 by 12 inch primed paper. I'll try to go step by step explaining the whole process and what I do, and also I've listed all the supplies that I use and you may need in the description, and I will put a link to the reference photo that I used in the description as well, so you can download it from there. Now, that being said, let's begin. I usually start by preparing the surface and putting the guidelines. For this demonstration, I'm gonna use primed paper as a surface for oils. I don't know if you can see in the video, but this paper has linen texture, which is something I really like. Here the paper already has a layer of white acrylic primer, and now I'm gonna put a couple more coats. I use neutral gray primer because it helps me to identify the values correctly as I'm painting. Value refers to the lightness or darkness of a color. As an example, if you put two brush strokes of the same color, one on the dark gray background and another one on the white, like this, it seems much darker on the second picture, right? It creates some sort of an optical illusion that may get in the way later, because it will be so much harder to judge darker colors. They would seem way too dark, and you most likely would lighten them up, getting their own values as a result. Now I'm gonna put a neutral medium gray background behind it. See, it's actually the same color. This illusion is just something to be aware of, and that's the reason why I prefer to paint on a gray surface, and I advise painting on anything rather than pure white or black. You can stain the canvas with burnt umber, burnt sienna, or some sort of a neutral gray tone, kind of like I do. There are so many approaches that artists use. At this point, it's just a matter of personal preference. Okay, now I'm taping the paper to a board. I like to put some key points and lightly outline the shape of the subject with a pencil. In this case, I'm drawing the basic shape of an eye based on the reference picture. When it's done, it's time to mix a palette for this painting. I use a limited palette which consists of 5 essential colors: burnt umber, ultramarine blue, cadmium red, cadmium yellow, and titanium white. I talk more about mixing skin tones and such in my color mixing video on this channel. I'll put a link to it in the description. But in short, I premix some groups of colors from the dark values to the light. This will be the colors I'm gonna start with, and then I'm gonna adjust or alter them as I paint. Here I've mixed the main tones, and now I'm mixing some of more saturated hues or some variations of colors that I see on the reference picture, as well as the eye color and the white of the eye. Now when everything's ready, we can start painting. I mostly paint from dark to light. It's a widely popular way of painting. It means you begin with the darks and gradually progress through the midtones to the lights. But sometimes I go back and forth. There is no real rule or a formula in the way I paint. Speaking of that, I just want to remind you that it's the way I like to paint, and it's just one of the ways of how you can approach oil painting. The colors still may seem too dark at this point, but it's actually just right, and you'll start to see it very soon as the painting progresses. On white paper it would look even more extreme. That's why, as I've said before, it's better to tone or prime the surface with anything but pure white color. Throughout the whole painting process, I'm trying to put the values correctly, step by step, which is basically I'm trying to paint the darker areas dark enough and lighter areas as light as they should be, always looking and comparing the painting with the reference picture. Okay, so the question I get asked a lot, I want to address it here. It's like, how do you switch between colors and not get them polluted? I'm gonna show you what I do. I'm sure there are different techniques and approaches, but here's what I found works for me. I use paper towels or tissues to wipe off my brushes before picking up a new color. I don't have to do it every time when I'm picking up a new color. I do it only when I feel like it's necessary. I have a little jar of paint thinner here, and I occasionally dip my brush into it when I feel like I need to. It's kind of like you would use water when painting with acrylics. I add a little bit of linseed oil into the paint thinner every time before proceeding to any subsequent layer to follow the fat over lean rule. However, I'm painting this study in one layer, wet on wet, so I don't have to care about any of this. Back to the question, also what helps me is that I use several brushes, each one for a different color group of sorts. For example, one brush is for pinks and beige tones, another one for dark blues and blacks, and so on. This way, it's easier to avoid polluting the new color because it's very similar to the paint that's left in the bristles after you wipe the brush. As I've said, I like to start with the darker values, but then I'm jumping to the lighter tones and from one area to another, then returning back. It's more of a free process for me. Quite an important tip or advice that I can give you is, on one hand, do not overdefine features and try not to put any harsh lines as you paint, especially if you paint in a portrait. I still struggle with it sometimes too, because we have that need to define features. If we see a line, let's say where the lower lid meets the white of the eye, most of the times we would want to emphasize it, when in reality everything is much softer and more subtle. On the other hand, don't go in and try to smooth everything out, right? It's better to have visible brush strokes or roughness rather than to blend it all out and mess up all the values in the process. You know what I mean. So it's very important to find that balance, so to speak. I want to take a little bit of time now to address something. Many people have this misconception that oil painting is very expensive, and don't get me wrong, it can be. But if you are just starting out, you will only need some basic materials. You don't need many oil colors. For example, I mainly use just 5 essential colors. Instead of buying canvases, you can prime a paper with gesso or acrylic primer. In terms of other supplies, I've made my palettes myself from a piece of glass that I got for free and a little bit of acrylic paint. So I want to encourage you and say that there are ways to cut the cost of things without undermining the quality, and these are just some of the ways. When it comes to these areas with many details, don't try to paint every single eyelash or something. Put them in groups pretty chaotically, loosely, and don't try to repeat it exactly like on the reference, especially with details as small as these ones. Like, you can put all this effort to paint it just like on the reference, but you'll spend way more time and the result will be just the same. Put in the smallest details like eyelashes, hair, wrinkles is not what makes a painting look more realistic. Having correct values and colors is what does the trick. And here's the finished painting. If you have any requests for the new videos, leave them in the comments and I might do some of them. Also, I'm gonna be releasing fine art prints of several of my paintings closer to the end of this month. They'll be available through my site, link to the site is in the description. I hope this tutorial was helpful. Thank you all so much for watching, and if you're gonna do this tutorial and repeat this painting study, please share it with me on Instagram. I'm curious to see the results you guys have. That's all for today, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!